In the spring of 2022, a man sat down in front of a phone camera. No production crew, no lighting rig, no script, and told the internet something nobody saw coming. He was flanked by his wife, Lori. His face looked worn. His voice was not the confident bark you remembered from 4 seasons of television. And what he said in those few quiet minutes, filmed in what looked like a living room, was the ending that no one had written for him. After 37 years, he was shutting down. The business was gone. That man was Bobby Goodson. And if you're here because you used to watch swamp loggers on Discovery Channel, you probably thought his story ended with the show. You thought he went back to the swamps, kept cutting trees, lived out a comfortable life doing the thing he was born to do. Most people assumed that. But the real story, the one that started long before any camera crew showed up in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and continued long after they left, is something else entirely. The man the cameras didn't fully show. To understand where Bobby ended up, you have to understand where he started. And it is not a simple story. Bobby Goodson came from 4 generations of loggers. That's not a detail for atmosphere. That's the entire architecture of his identity. When he was 11 years old, in the summer, he went to work with his father. Not in some supervised child labor law compliant way. He went to work. In an interview with ABC News affiliate WTTI 12, he described it plainly, "I started in the logging business when I was 11 years old in the summer with my dad. I knew I wanted to cut trees. I knew I wanted to log. That kind of early certainty can be a gift. It can also be a cage." Growing up around older men who worked hard and drank harder, Bobby picked up habits young. He went to school drunk in the 5th grade. By the time he was a teenager, he later told CBN, he could not remember a single day in his life when he hadn't been high, drinking, or using some kind of drug. He said it without self-pity. He was just accounting for the facts of his own life. When Bobby was 14, he met a girl named Lori. Their relationship began volatile and stayed that way for years. Both of them would be honest about that later. Bobby admitted that when he got mad, he didn't hold back. Lori said she pushed back just as hard. "I knew how to push the right buttons," she told CBN. These were 2 people who did not yet have the tools to be kind to each other. When they were both 16 years old, Lori had a baby. They named him Justin. They wouldn't get married for another 5 years. When they finally did, Bobby's brother quietly took bets among family that the marriage would last less than a year. Bobby didn't find out about those bets until after the wedding. He laughed about it later. It's the kind of laugh that has a lot of history in it, and that history was darker than most people watching him on cable television ever knew. The night everything nearly ended. There is one story Bobby tells about his years of drinking that is impossible to hear and not sit with for a moment. One night, he came home drunk. Lori found him passed out and tried to wake him. He flew into a rage. What happened next, Lori described in her own words to CBN. "He just sort of picked me up by the throat, and I can remember my head slamming up against the wall. The phone rang, and I can remember him just letting me go, and I fell on the back of that bed and it broke it. He answered the phone like there was nothing going on, and he looked down at me and he said, 'It's your dad.'" Lori choked her way through that phone conversation. Bobby fell asleep. The next morning, he didn't remember what he had done to her, or what he had done to their home. Bobby's own account also told to CBN, "I remember doors knocked off hinges, holes in the walls, just the whole house was disarrayed, and I couldn't remember what happened. I made my mind up then, I cannot live like this. I could have killed Lori. I could have done anything. I don't even know where Justin was at, but I knew that something had to change in my life then, or it was going to end very badly." That Sunday, they went to church. Bobby prayed and gave his life to Jesus. He later described the feeling this way, "I felt so good inside that night when I left. I knew I had done the right thing, and I knew God was going to help me. And immediately the alcohol, all that stuff was gone." You can argue about the theology of that if you want, But the practical reality is that from that day forward, Bobby Goodson was a different man. Lori gave her life to Christ the following week. They were baptized together. They didn't just survive, they built something. Bobby and Lori went on to raise Justin and had a daughter named Brittany. Eventually, 5 grandchildren. And the logging company that had once been just a rough, underfunded operation became something the rest of the country would eventually see on television, from the swamp to the screen. Goodson's All Terrain Logging was not a polished operation. That was the whole point. The company worked in the swamps of eastern North Carolina, the kind of logging environment that most operations won't touch. Flooded forests, soft ground that will swallow a machine whole if you misjudge it by 10 feet, timber buried in water and mud. The machinery Bobby's crew operated weighed hundreds of thousands of pounds and cost millions of dollars to maintain. Getting timber out of a swamp is, in almost every way, harder than getting it out of dry land. The margins are thinner, the dangers are higher. Bobby had built a business in one of the most punishing segments of an already punishing industry. Discovery Channel came looking for exactly that kind of story. Swamp Loggers debuted on Discovery in 2009 and ran for 4 seasons, ending in 2012. At its peak, it pulled in millions of viewers who had never thought once about where lumber came from or how it got there. Bobby became, almost overnight, one of those rare reality TV personalities who seemed exactly the same on camera as they probably were off it. He once told CBN, "I still don't think of myself as a star. I mean, I just felt like I'm a person with a job, and we just did our job." The film crew would shoot upward of 200 hours of footage to produce a single 44-minute episode. Bobby and Justin and the crew just worked while cameras rolled. And viewers saw something they had not expected to find on cable television, a family business operating by real stakes, real danger, and real respect between a father and a son. His son Justin was not just a character on the show, he was Bobby's second-in-command, the person who would one day take over the whole operation. That transition was always the unspoken subtext of the series. The question was whether Justin would ever have a business to inherit, the reason the show actually ended. By 2012, Goodson's All Terrain Logging walked away from the television deal. For a long time, the explanation people heard was vague, something about the show running its course. But Bobby was more specific than that in interviews. In a 2012 report from WCTI 12, he said it plainly, "They wanted us to start having more fighting, more drama, and I'm not willing to do that." The production company wanted manufactured conflict. They wanted the blow-ups and crew arguments that drive reality TV ratings. Bobby refused. His son Justin put it this way, "We get a little more done, but we were pretty much the same whether they were filming or not. So the cameras left. Bobby had plans." He told that same reporter he was going to concentrate on making the job more efficient and updating the equipment. He sounded like a man with a roadmap, but roadmaps don't account for everything. And over the next decade, things started getting harder in ways that had nothing to do with swamp conditions or equipment failures. 10 years of holding on. What happened between 2012 and 2022 is not a dramatic story. There was no single catastrophe, no moment of financial recklessness, no scandal. What there was a slow and grinding decade of a small business owner fighting an economy that was shifting underneath him. Bobby kept operating. He and Justin kept the company going. They launched a YouTube channel called Goodson's All Terrain, which gave fans a way to stay connected to the operation. Raw footage of their work, without the Discovery format. The channel showed that Bobby had not gone anywhere. He was still out there, still in the swamp, still cutting trees. But logging runs on diesel. Heavy equipment runs on diesel. A fleet of trucks, Bobby would later explain, might cover 700 to 800 miles a day. At 5 miles to the gallon per truck, you can do that math quickly. When fuel prices are stable, those numbers are painful but manageable. When diesel triples, they are not, and that's exactly what happened. By early 2022, diesel prices had nearly tripled from where they had been 2 years prior. Combine that with broader inflation driving up the cost of parts and equipment, and a truck shortage that made replacing aging vehicles almost impossible. And the numbers stopped adding up. Bobby had been fighting for 2 years before he finally spoke publicly about what was happening. He spent 2 years trying to find a way through. And in May of 2022, he made a video with Lori by his side and told his fans the company was closing after 37 years. That was it, the Facebook Live that nobody saw coming. Bobby did not announce the closure with a press release. He didn't give an interview to a trade publication. He sat down in front of a camera the way someone does when they're too tired to manage how they look and just need to say something true. He had been in this industry since he was 11 years old. He had built the business from nothing, survived his own worst years, raised a son into it, and kept the operation going through market swings and equipment breakdowns and every other obstacle a swamp logger encounters. And now he was explaining, in plain terms, that fuel prices had done what the swamps couldn't. When you got a fleet of trucks and you're running probably 700-800 miles a day, a truck is going to get 5 miles to the gallon. That fuel increase kills you. And so I didn't see any way out, he told WCTI 12. What came next surprised even Bobby. Dozens of other loggers from across the country reached out, by email, by phone, telling him the same thing had happened to them. They had been closing quietly, alone, feeling like they had failed somehow. Bobby's announcement had given their experience a name and a public moment. He used that moment carefully. In the United States, logging is a $300 billion industry, and we loggers are the ones where it starts, he told ABC News 4. That's the grassroots. We are at the bottom of the totem pole, and when we start failing, there's a whole lot of people that are going to start feeling the pain. He was not blaming anyone in that moment except the economics. He was making an argument. He was trying to turn a personal loss into something that might push for change, where Bobby Goodson stands now. Bobby Goodson is, at the time of this video, somewhere in his mid-60s. He has a wife of decades, 2 children, and 5 grandchildren. He came up in a world that did not give him a stable foundation, a world of addiction and violence and chaos, and he built something from it anyway. He built a company. He built a reputation. He built a marriage that his own brother had quietly bet against. The logging company closed. That is a real loss, and Bobby has been honest about what that means for him. Logging was not just his job. It was his family's inheritance across 4 generations, the thing his father taught him, the thing he handed to Justin. Closing the doors on Goodson's All Terrain Logging was not like quitting a career. It was like the end of a lineage. But Bobby and Lori have not disappeared. The YouTube channel is still active. He still has a presence on social media and still talks to fans who have been following him since the Discovery days. And there is something worth sitting with in how he described what mattered most, even above the company, even above the television fame. When CBN asked him about everything his faith had given him, he didn't mention the show. He said, "The most important thing God has done for me is by saving me. By doing that, he has saved my marriage. We've got a legacy that's going to live on. Our children love the Lord. Our grandkids go to church every day. It's something that money can't buy is what God can give you. The company is gone. The show has been over for more than a decade. But Bobby Goodson is not a person whose story ends at either of those points. He started working at 11. He survived a decade of addiction. He built something from nothing. He closed it when he had no other choice. And he has been honest about all of it, every step of the way. For someone who spent his whole career doing something most people won't do, in conditions most people wouldn't endure, and who refused to perform a version of himself that wasn't real even when a television network was asking him to, that consistency is the story. Not the show, not the closure. Here's what I'd leave you with. Bobby walked away from a TV deal in 2012 because he wouldn't stage fights for the camera. 37 years after he started in that swamp, he closed the business and explained exactly why on a phone camera with no spin. Given how much of what we watch is manufactured, does that kind of stubbornness look like a flaw to you, or does it look like character? Leave your answer in the comments. I'd genuinely like to know what you think. And if this is your first video here and you're not subscribed yet, there are more stories like this one waiting for you. Real people, straight telling. The button is right there.